It's always after the fact.
It's always after the fact. Now, I've had some social media outlets that unfortunately got deplatformed for one thing or the other.
I understand. That happens.
But I made a name for myself on social media for speculating about some things. I saw some Super Bowl outcomes and Super Bowl scores embedded in Hollywood entertainments.
Got to take you to Vegas.
Well, Vegas doesn't allow you to predict the exact score of the Super Bowl. The odds would be so incredible that if you got lucky enough to do it, you'd own the casino. Okay, let's get this breakdown started. This is going to be, effectively, Bickford Explains Everything Volume 4, as well as Gnostic Sunday School number 10. I'm calling it Pattern or Paranoia. Should be self-explanatory. Let's head over to that aforementioned Reddit thread for unified code theory. This now frozen conversation began with a somewhat accurate bullet points breakdown of some various aspects of my work. So I felt like whoever posted this was paying attention to my work and gave me a fair shake in giving a brief synopsis of the work here. And then we have what I referred to as some anti-marketing. He's a paranoid schizophrenic. I'll go into what actual schizoid disorders are later in the video, and we'll see if that maps onto what I'm doing here. I will admit that predicting the ban on Ritz crackers based on media about attacks in Syria sounds completely crazy. I never said that the Twin Towers never existed, and then there's a misrepresentation of the overlays. So that's the anti-marketing aspect. But let's go over to that ban on Ritz crackers, or effing Ritz crackers. That's an even more interesting symbol about targeting the orange man bad and then trying to get people to stop making new copies. Now, precognition and heightened sensitivity, I believe, are part of a co-creative faculty that St. Paul points to in 1 Corinthians 1:30. And I'll go over some of that later, too. But I do believe that this heightened sensitivity is a function of working with the Holy Spirit. If you're working for truth beauty, then you're on the right team, I could say. You might not always be inspired by the same indwelling spirit. You might get a bad spirit in there. So we have the Ritz cracker ban happening in July, later that year, just a few months after my video. Now, I posted that video redundantly to multiple pages and then took these screenshots while those pages were still up. So some of you might be looking at the screen now going, where are these videos? Well, that whole channel's been taken down and all of this stuff was censored. And I talked to George Noory about that. I'll show you some clips of that conversation again. The culling card, Lights in Damascus, was a video I posted by another name as well, Culling the Crackers. And so I talked about the orange man bad symbolism. I talked about how the ginger character of Christian in the movie Midsommar represented a red head with blue eyes and white skin. So he was red, white, and blue, and his name was Christian. And we're seeing what this kind of pagan world system that's up against the culture that was essentially created by Christians has been kind of reappropriated by the pagan pop culture, and Christianity has been kind of eviscerated and then turned into this Walmart American fascist Christianity that doesn't map onto the teachings of Christ. And I talked about some of that in the past with the meme Think Infection and how Orange Man Bad was becoming a symbol for Christ. Back then I had posted another video, They Wear Masks. This was a repost of the video in April of 2018. And in that video I talk about, among other things, disgenuine media functioning as a kind of psychedelic drug in an abusive system that was psychologically priming people for an unstable and incredibly dependent society. Ritz cracker products are being recalled over salmonella fears. And that is the headlines in July, and the video Culling the Crackers was posted in April 14th, 2017. Ritz cracker ban happens July 23rd. So I predicted a crazy thing. It happened a few months later, so it wasn't a crazy symptom of a mental disorder. It was an accurate multi-layered prediction, which I can explain how it happened, why it happens, as a function of this collective consciousness tapping into a co-creative faculty. And so human beings are co-creating things that are embedded with the intelligence of something else they're working with. Now, Orange Man Bad is in the headlines as Orange Jesus as a couple days ago. This is a new trending hashtag Orange Jesus. So we make Orange Man Bad, and that's the flood. The Trump Pence are sounding. We have the Orange Man Bad. We have the plague of the Kek frogs from Kekistan, and we have the boils and the sores and the bad spirit of the age. And now, oh, what a friend we have in Orange Jesus. So Christ has been taken out of the picture, replaced with Orange Man Bad, and now Orange Man Bad is being crucified in public, and it's a symptom of the spirit of the age. And had these channels stayed up, people would be well aware now that I've been routinely predicting this, and I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm trying to explain what unified code theory even is.
Well, welcome to Beyond Belief. Jason James Bickford with us, an esoteric researcher, visual artist, and independent media producer. Jason, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, George. I first thought that there might be an intent behind this, and my understanding of how this symbolism and precognition works has expanded over the years. And I believe that there's something I would refer to as a co-creative faculty in which human beings are tapping into information, data.
And they might not even know it.
They might not even know it. I don't think that you have to have a conscious, articulated knowledge that you're putting this kind of symbolism in any kind of creative work. We can find it in artwork, literature, poetry, particularly in Hollywood. I do believe that if there is an agenda, it's something that has more of a spiritual explanation, that we're maybe tapping into a higher self or a universal mind that exists outside of our physical limitations of time and space, and therefore could access future outcomes or potentialities.
In your research, where does God come into this picture?
Well, I believe in the Christian concept that God is ultimately ineffable. So at times, the less I say about God's intent is maybe best. However, if I see God as a creative force that is behind the universe, I don't see God as the proverbial blind watchmaker who set up a mechanized universe and then just set it in motion, and we're off on a spinning marble
away
and
from it.
nowhere. Right. I see God as an intelligence and a creative force that is consciously breathing life into our world. And I don't see the world as cold matter, but more as something that's generated from our consciousness. So you and I are collectively, all of us, generating the world that we exist in. And it's more like an interactive lucid dream world in which we're participating with a creative faculty that's ultimately mysterious, but leaves fingerprints all over the place.
Do you predict the future?
I have speculated about future events and been right based on looking at predictive programming after studying predictive programming after the fact. It's one thing to say there's symbolism for 9/11 in a myriad of...
Before 9/11?
No, I don't know of anybody who...
It's always after the fact.
It's always after the fact. Now, I've had some social media outlets that unfortunately got deplatformed for one thing or the other.
I understand. That happens.
But I made a name for myself on social media for speculating about some things. I saw some Super Bowl outcomes and Super Bowl scores embedded in Hollywood entertainments.
Got to take you to Vegas.
I had imagined that, well, Vegas doesn't allow you to predict the exact score of the Super Bowl. The odds would be so incredible that if you got lucky enough to do it, you'd own the casino. YouTube and Google typically have to resort to false copyright violations or claims of hate speech in order to show a justification for taking those pages down. Folks who pay attention to my work know that that is not what I'm doing. I'm not bootlegging movies or promoting hatred or hate speech. You could say that Trump's campaign is rooted in hatred. You've got your hat that's red, that's hatred. An orange man bad is a bit of a clown. He's an icon. He's a false icon that is worshipped by people who love to hate and hate to love. And we're putting on the Ritz. This is a meme think infection in which symbols and language are used to psychologically prime people so that it's easier for them to make certain mental associations when they get triggered by the psychoactive, abusive media system. Now, I've mentioned that the media works kind of like this Gnostic idea of the archons, the powers, the rulers, and the principalities, which St. Paul warns us are very real and are things in which we are in a struggle with. They are spiritual energies. I believe there's something here that maps onto this idea of the spirit of the age with COVID. And I've spoken about how these anagrams of these headlines, which I was working with under a state of spiritual intimation, suggested that there was some sort of biblical symbolism embedding a breath event that maps onto bad weather, bad breath, and the biblical events of the Jews in the desert under Moses and the manna and the wandering Jews wrestling in the flesh. I've talked about how that movement into Africa is like a movement from Jerusalem, which is in the heavens, down into Africa, which is the flesh. So you get exiled into the desert of the real, and you're wrestling with the flesh, which is similar to that temptation of Christ in the desert for 40 days. And Quarantina is where we get 40 days. So the Quarantina in the desert is 40 days. The culling weatherizations breathalyzed brimful of manna. Here we have biblical symbolism for the bowl judgments being breathed out. So we have some sort of spirit of the age or judgment passed on humanity, and it involves things in the air or breathalyzed. And culling weatherizations refers to a change in the climate, which is a culling of humanity. And now I'm not going to speculate into conspiracy theory substantiations here. I don't sign on to any of the popular conspiracy theories about current events over the past few years. I believe something spiritual has happened and that the surface level of things is a bit of an illusion.
Lord of hosts will do battle for us. Behold his mighty hand. From my cold, dead hands.
Moses did not write the Torah. Moses had been dead for 250 years before the first word of the Torah appeared. And if you read the Torah, you will know that in the 34th chapter of Deuteronomy, the last book of the Torah, the story of Moses' death and burial is told. It's a remarkable author that can write that. And if you haven't read that story, you ought to. God and Moses are alone in the valley of Moab underneath Mount Nebo.
Let's take a look at Mount Nebo phonetically. Write it down now. Empty Nebo. That's an empty abasement. That's like Tim Tebow pretending to pray in public as a form of self-aggrandizement. That's another weapon used against Christianity, these charlatans and demagogues. Moses was one of them, and it's why God killed him.
And Moses dies, and God buries him. There's nobody else around. And God writes his obituary. And God had a lot of things to choose from because Moses had a rather illustrious career. But what God said about Moses, according to Deuteronomy, is that Moses was 120 years old when he died, and this is King James English, and I quote, "His eyes were not dimmed, and his natural force was not abated." I'll put that into contemporary English. Moses, at age 120 when he died, needed neither eyeglasses nor Viagra. That's what that text means.
Moses was supposed to spend 40 days in the desert, and he took the Jews out there for 400 years. He kept wrestling with the flesh, and that is Moses as the charlatan who keeps coming back for more. Now let's take a look at some work I did on dragons. And the word dragon, we get some interesting anagrams here. And we have symbolism that maps onto the teaching about eat the lion and the Gospel of Thomas, Logia 7. We have a story about the old gods, or the archons or Nephilim of the earth, and these fiery passions which came down on the earth and couldn't resist women. And that is the art of the pheromones and hormones. This is cosmetics, temptation, sexual seduction. These things are the weapons of the pharaoh, the pheromones and the hormones. And those are the fiery darts and the blazing arrows of desire. And there is Greek mythology that maps onto Christian symbolism in an esoteric way that reveals the song of fire in the air. And that's the dragon. Dragons backwards, spelled backwards, is snow guard. So we have the stick versus the no stick, or Moses with his rod and staff, his hard rod, as John Shelby Spong, the progressive wolf in sheep's clothing, was pointing out. We have this idea of the centrifugal bulb dramatizes ill weather in Oz hymnal. So this is a song of fire and ice embedded in the anagram for this article, which I was decoding in 2017 and suggesting it predicted something as crazy as a ban on Ritz crackers, which would be a sign that we are entering into this song of fire and ice, good and evil. And there was a bit of an Acts 17 inversion, where when the police arrest Jason and take him in and then let him go, it's a sign that we've invented, or we have entered into this inverted world somewhere over the rainbow in the Oz hymnal. So we have in that Wizard of Oz movie, we have what was and what is. So we have the black and white world, and then the world of hypersaturation, and that is the new flood. We are in the post-apocalyptic world. God said he's not going to flood the world. This is the new flood. It's not rain. It's a flood of information in the days of Noah. You need saturation here, and that's when we increase the saturation of this image, we get the fake tan. And so we think of white man, we think of Christians, we think of conservatives, Republicans, patriots, and we associate it with this kind of toxic Caucasian paradigm. That is an illusion. And of course, in a Christian world, the flesh is a bit of an illusion and is less consequential. And the Christian movement was a multicultural movement from the beginning. I'll produce more work on something I mentioned earlier, too. There's a conversation happening in seminaries and in theological schools that hasn't hit the internet yet, but it's pretty obvious that Luke is Lucius, and Lucius of Cyrene was a black man. So at least a third of the New Testament's written by a black man. There's a whole flood of new information happening now that we are in the Donald, the days of Noah, and that is the flood of information for your information. That's a Freedom of Information Act. You get your tinfoil hat on, and you get hit in the head with the flood of information. Hopefully, according to the malevolent spiritual forces, you'll go crazy with this, or sound crazy. So you get your, conspiracy theorists who have 10% truth, and then they add 90% speculation, and they make that 10% truth sound crazy. Archon is where we get anarchy and the word hierarchy. And when you want to go up to that hierarchy, someone has their eye on you. And that ion maps onto the radiation symbolism I was talking about in the previous presentation. So we behold a pale bronco here. This is the white horse. This is more symbolism of the apocalypse.
What has been going on down below as the presumed vehicle of O.J. Simpson is still traveling very slowly northbound along the 5 freeway, coming up again towards the 91 intersection.
So what does it mean to be over the rainbow? It could mean we're over the covenant. The rainbow, the word rainbow in Hebrew is the same word that's used as a war bow or an archer's bow. And in archery, if you miss the mark, that's hata, or to sin. And that's the same in Greek as well, hamartia. So when you miss the mark in archery, you sin. Jesus came down here and died for our sins because we weren't using the rainbow of light to get to the other side. We couldn't cross the street. He had to help us look both ways. So the weather bell culling humanity and the formalized Ritz band, as well as this Oz hymnal and the Song of Fire and Ice, these are all complex esoteric ideas that are multi-layered and embedded in the current trending pop culture entertainments and paradigms of the day. So we have a manufactured racial tension. We have what I call the Peter Griffin and Homer Simpson effect, in which, out of shape, stupid, incompetent white men are all over the media. And then if you Google happy white woman on Google Images, you see a bunch of interracial relationships with white women. So happy white women are sick of Orange Man Bad, and they're sick of Jesus. And so they're associating white men and Christianity together in a reappropriated cartoon caricature straw man. And that's part of the spirit of the age. And this information leak, let's say the Donald, the days of Noah, the flood of information. Some of that information's too potent and people are ODing on it. And we have a rise in mental disorders, anxiety. Teenagers are having a hard time identifying with their own bodies and self-image in a way that maps onto, how humanity has viewed itself forever, basically. So now people are declaring themselves non-binary and transgender, when it seems more like there is something else happening that I talked about in previous Sunday schools that I call the spirit of the age. And this was something I predicted in 2018 was coming, and it would represent like a ripple passing through the world. I also created visual art that mapped onto heroin usage, too much information, a bad breath, and a bad spirit. There's an older video a couple years ago now. I uploaded some artwork that seems to symbolically predict the COVID phenomenon, which I talked about mapping onto something being released out of Sheol. So we have this idea that devil and demons are locked down in the underworld and they come out every once in a while, and it looks like they may have come out during a time that maps onto the events of September 11th, 2001. And so we live in a new world that some people think is a hologram or an illusion. There's some kind of built-in nihilistic thinking into that. I see it differently. I see us in a post-apocalyptic or post-revealing world in which information is being shown to us that the world doesn't function the way we thought it was. And there is a dissociative and active intelligence that is working through human creativity, which can be quantified and mapped. I'm taking bylines and phrases that are commonly repeated in these headlines at times when I feel inspired to do so. I don't do this all the time, every day. That would drive me nuts. But I feel inspired to do this. And then I post a video that sounds ridiculous. And so now I understand people watch this stuff and they think Jason's crazy. But what I'm talking about is systematically explainable as a function of the Holy Spirit working with inspired human co-creative activity. So we have fingerprints embedded in creative activity. Could be a political campaign, a Super Bowl commercial, a scripture, a movie. This type of activity has been going on for years. And if we think of engaging in the scripture in the way that, like the reader response theory literary critics of the mid-20th century would, we see the meaning of the text doesn't come from the author, but actually comes from an interaction with the reader in the text and this kind of collective mind, or this new meaning is made by confronting the text repeatedly. And we're advised in the scriptures to refer to the text in the Bible to see if it's true today. What the Bible is saying is that it's a magical book that uses language in a way that embeds precognition. And I've proven time and time again that this is still happening in the media. So the world that we live in is interacting with an intelligence that I feel personally functions the way St. Paul describes in Ephesians when he talks about receiving gnosis and then realizing the manifold wisdom is to be explained to the archons, with whom we are in an epic struggle. So that is the Song of Fire and Ice, good and evil, hormones and pheromones. That's Moses going down into the desert and then taking the Jews down there and bringing them down there for like 400 years and they can't get out. So in order to get out, they die, but they go back to the promised land. So Moses dies and is buried in the mountain. So the spirit of Moses is embedded in the earth like Set or Seth. And the people that cross the Jordan go up to the promised land and they go home. So they go back to a spiritual experience, while the spirit of Moses and the old Jews are embedded as, let's say, disembodied spirits that roam the arid places. And you can make you can make a space in your heart and your mind for the indwelling of these spirits, which set up shop in your mind like a mimetic infection. And then you can become, say, jealous, angry, resentful, self-centered, full of fear and worry. And patterns emerge time and time again that map onto this manifold layer of symbolism. So what we do to ourselves and what we do to the earth and what God's body is and his relationship to the man made in his image, that kind of fractal of patterns goes farther. And it even maps out into this fractal of repeating pattern of the Orange Man Bad and the Ritz crackers. Now think about Trump Tower, the golden one, kind of looks like a stack of Ritz crackers. And then you've got the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. So when you think of Trump being he's not a real Ritz. He's not a Ritz-Carlton. He's a Trump. And the Trump card is a bit of a ruse or an illusion. So Orange Man Bad isn't that orange. That's not his real skin color. And what do the crackers have up their sleeves? It's just a bunch of more crackers. So I think what we're talking about here is like a battle of the whitey bulgers and the white goats, and this cultural clash in which Black America wants to reappropriate white privilege. Instead of do away with the privilege, they just want to have fun with it for a while. And women, instead of doing away with toxic masculinity, they want to take it away from the men and peg them and put on some shoulder pads and play their game and become toxic and masculine and even take hormones and become men themselves. So it's like a mirror game in which we're becoming what we hate. And the people that hate Donald Trump are as filled with as much hatred as the people that rally against other things. And now I have this idea here embedded in some anagrams that we're looking at that goes back to that 2017 cracker video. So this is not new work. The potential presence of salmonella was repeated over and over again. I heard this phrase, potential presence, potential presence. So I did some anagrams, and I see this symbolism, necrotized planet, public enemy, or PE. So you're going to chuck D's nuts out the window or somewhere else. Interesting fact, Chuck D of Public Enemy used to work on talk radio with Rachel Maddow before she made it to MSNBC. Now I'm going to show you the Donald Duck here. Do you see this? You forgot about two things. You can try to blackball me, but I have a vote in this game. So I'm speaking esoterically here to the people that want to compartmentalize my work. It gets out to where it needs to go anyway. I've got, you forgot about my two things here. Anyway, so that's Donald Duck's face embedded in the water world. And then we've got the other world, the black balls, or the necrotized planet. So PE necrotizes the planet, or the planet necrotizes the PE. This anagram can go both ways, and that represents the Song of Fire and Ice.
May I check your coat, sir?
Check out this brief scene from the movie Public Enemy about Jay Dillinger.
He's been supplying cars to the syndicates in Capone. When Dillinger bought that coat, he must have been at Berman switching cars.
I'll come back to Christian Bale and his relationship to the figure of Caleb in Numbers 13, one of the two honest witnesses in the desert sent by Moses. So we've got Christian Bale playing Caleb, who's going after Dillinger, who was infamously castrated. His exceptionally large member was put in a jar. It's like I think a J. Dilla, the pickle jar. You got yourself into a pickle now. Anyway, the whitey bulgers, the hung white men, the people with too much, right? He's handsome. He's got the ladies. Apparently, he's got a huge pair of balls and the Dillinger to match. So there's a firearm named after Dillinger. That's also possibly a reference to his large manhood. So that's the whitey bulgers, the goats. Orange Man Good. It's like Phil Collins here. And he's got a long, long way to go. He's not done singing his songs and paying his wages of sin, I suppose. Here he is in the remastered version. Orange Man got remastered in 2016. That's when the Donald was elected. That's interesting. So we've got the Donald Orange Man bad, Phil Collins Orange Man good. He used to be in Genesis. Do you get me now? Anyway, he said hello, goodbye. There's an extra song on that new remastered version of Phil Collins, No Jacket Required. And you don't need a jacket because you're bulletproof. I am pro-oxygen. Sweet, beautiful oxygen, says Donald Trump. And the liberals suffocate themselves. That's a symptom of Trump derangement syndrome. I lived with someone for a year that had Trump derangement syndrome. He would watch CNN on a regular basis and couldn't stop blaming Trump and hating Trump for everything. Now, I think the icon and character of Donald Trump is a bit of a toxic, narcissistic clown, and if you're voting for Democrats or Republicans or anybody, you're an idiot, but I'll save that for another video. Nonetheless, these are the kings and queens and jesters and fools who play out a bread and circus puppet show that plays out in the WWF ring, on the basketball court, all over the place, and celebrity gossip. What does this have to do with blackplanet.com? I went over to this website. I just found it while searching Black Planet stuff on Google after thinking about the Fear of a Black Planet Public Enemy album that had the symbolism of Donald Duck on the cover. That's a early 90s hip-hop album, rap album, angry civil rights rap. So anyway, we have some non-standard black people here. I see some clothing styles that I could say are cultural reappropriation from Europeans, but that's all right. Black Planet is black owned and operated by a diverse group of black people who are essentially seeking to ride the wave and reappropriate goat stuff, basically. Why do I say that? Take a look at this here. Out with the old, in with the new. Basically, get rid of white guys. Hashtag Black Planet. So here we have a quote from The Metamorphosis, a short story, famous short story from Franz Kafka. Now, a nigga's biggest dream is to go legit, but don't quote me, boy, because I ain't saying shit, said Eazy-E, who would die of AIDS, allegedly. Not sure what happened to Eazy-E, but he was in the government-created gangster rap scene straight out of the CIA. Anyway, Franz Kafka is a German goat, but we're going out with the old and in with the new. So ownership matters, they say here on the website. Black Lives Matter, ownership matters. So they just took that shit. They just took that quote, removed Kafka's name, and then threw down their hashtag. Now, let he who has Sophia understand the meaning of what's going on here. I've talked about how the stories in the Bible keep repeating symbolically, and that in the number 636 is the symbol for the book repeats itself, and the end meets the beginning. The unveiling is there's a new Genesis. So that's like Orange Man Good, Phil Collins starts a new band. We have a story about angels that were supposed to stay on one side of the firmament, but decided to go down into the world and then do things. And so we have some symbolism in movies and mythologies and fairy tales about creatures and beings from one world coming over to another, about apprentices playing with or getting access to too much information too soon and then doing some things they're not supposed to be doing. We have here Daryl Hannah of Splash and Blade Runner, and she's wearing her raccoon mask. So that's there's some language there that embeds racial epithets, and we have some symbolism in the mythologies of the day that show a kind of black and white dualism that can map onto, say, believers versus atheists, or black versus white, or any other kind of divide, feminist versus toxic masculine. I don't know. And this is our struggle with the flesh in the quarantina of 40 days, which is not 40 days, but it seems like a lifetime. It seems like different epochs and eras of humanity and different communities have different temptations they're dealing with. And one right now is the ego monster. I want what someone else has. I deserve it. jealousy, the ego monster, and this kind of cultural reappropriation maps onto that. That's the hunting of the Whitey Bulgers, who was the basis for Frank Costello.
You got something you want to ask me?
I warn you, if you make any further inquiries, or if you say a single word to anyone.
So consider Jack Nicholson in The Shining as Seth, wandering the desert of the real. So he's paying the wages of sin as the caretaker. And now we have the, let's say, the spirit that roams through the arid places as the spirit of the age that infects the breath and the pneuma and the ruach of different people differently. And the black community isn't unique in being tempted. I was illustrating what their particular group is being inundated with, while everybody in general is seeing something that is kind of like an inverted love. Something that looks like love is actually a kind of hatred or a weaponized love that's used to perpetuate this infinite war. So people think they're protecting their kids, or they're protecting their culture, or they're protecting their Christianity, and then they go out and behave in a toxic way that is by design.
Hello.
Hey, what's up there, fruitcake? I'm looking for paintwork.
Who is this?
This is Mike.
I don't know. Mike who?
Mike the rookie. You got paintwork for me or what?
Paintwork? Why would I have paintwork for you? I'm over here just barely paying my rent and utilities with these freaking YouTube videos and a few dozen people hitting me up on Patreon. I haven't even sold any artwork myself in a few months.
Oh, yeah? Well, you don't got no work for me.
No, man, I'm like I said, I'm just barely scraping by myself. It's not easy trying to market some of the most esoteric and profound insights in modern times through a YouTube channel that's shadow banned.
Hey, I know what it's like. What do you say we get together and paint each other up?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Hey, we're good like that, right? Paint the town, night on the town, right, Mike? What do you say, Bill?
Yeah, my name's Jason. How about you don't call me? Maybe if I need your help, I'll call you. How's that?
All right. You ready, Chief?
Yeah, go ahead.
5785.
Oh, you're stuck down there in lower Sheol, huh?
Yo, shoot, way downtown, fruitcake. Look, any help you can give me, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, next time I want to catch a criminal charge or beat the crap out of someone or just, really stick it to someone on Twitter, I'll holler at you. But of course, you might end up just waiting until Judgment Day, and we all know what's going to happen then, right?
Hey, God bless us all, huh? God bless you, babe. Wish you luck in the future. Say your prayer.
So it makes sense to me that a website that maps onto this symbolism of the public enemy and the black planet encodes a kind of symptom of this mimetic virus that perpetuates the infinite jest, the black and white game on the grid. The black and white game is embedded in that trip from Oz back into the previous world. So the two worlds embedded in Genesis as 616 and 666 map onto this black and white world, and then the full color world of maybe illusion or let's say hypersaturation. So Oz is a little too much. That wasn't a microdose. We have some other anagrams here that map onto this idea of Oz as the desert where Kek or Set would live. So we have the plague of frogs in the desert as a apocalyptic symbol. Apocalypse doesn't mean end of the world, it means unveiling. We have Pepe's anti-electrons, and this maps onto the covalent bonds and the symbolism that I was unpacking in previous videos about Jesus appointing the 70 or 72 pairs, 2 by 2. And the 270 and the or 72, depending on the translation. This maps onto radioactivity and depleted uranium-235 that Christ could be, let's say, encoding in Luke 10. So we have symbolism that maps onto Q metal and the depleted weaponized uranium that's a part of actual warfare in the desert. So again, spiritual warfare in the desert has symbolism that maps onto the scripture, which maps onto biological and radioactive chemistry and physics, and that also maps onto these ideas of, let's say, chemical warfare, from Chernobyl to the stuff in the desert. Then we've got C. Baal, or Caleb, and Yeshua going down into the desert and giving an honest report. And we see Caleb, or Christian Bale, playing Batman, who is a misunderstood Lucifer, or bringer of light and the way, who is an honest reporter or detective. Then we have Bale playing the detective in Public Enemy, and he's going after Dillinger, who is a goat gone bad. So he would be like a Moses character. He's got his big stick in his hand. You know, his natural force is not abated. He's got a big Dillinger. So that big handgun and the phallus in the jar and the symbolism of like a Susie plaster caster coming to get the white goats maps onto being deplatformed.
This morning, President Trump waking up without his favorite megaphone.
Let me ask you, should I keep the Twitter going or not? Keep it going?
Twitter permanently banning the commander-in-chief's personal account with 88 million followers after an initial 12-hour lockout following Wednesday's riots at the U.S. Capitol.
Think about it. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
Hey, I mean, you know, I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
For about 7 years now, I've been decoding headlines and modern mythologies to make accurate predictions about the future. It sounds crazy, but has absolutely nothing to do with actual schizoid disorders.
You have schizoaffective disorders, which is kind of a mixture of schizophrenia and depression disorders. It's not just one disease. So the whole sort of array of behavioral symptoms we're going to look at now, remember, some of them are more common in different subtypes than others. This is just the first broad overpass. So beginning to make sense of the disease. What it is, above all else, is a disease of cognitive abnormalities, of abnormal sequential thought. And the term that's given for it is loose associations. All of us can tell a story where we have a pretty good ability to put it sequentially and have the facts go in a way where it will make sense to any other listener. You do not see this in schizophrenics. Sequential thinking is greatly impaired. And instead of having logical sequences of information that they give, things tangent all over the place, bouncing around all over, where in retrospect you can kind of see how they might have gotten from A to Z, although most people would have gone from A to B at that point. The tangential thinking being another term for it, the loose associations. So what do you wind up seeing there? You get schizophrenics, for example, who get terribly confused in a sentence, whether when they are hearing about boxers, they are unable to keep straight within one sentence to separate out whether they're talking about a dog or they're talking about an occupation, because they slip back and forth between the two. Confusion between being a caddy, someone who golf, whatever, and a Cadillac, short term for that. All sorts of ways in which they can't hold on to the sequential logic, and instead there's just this tangenting, getting caught up in the loose associations. You're talking about a boxer. If you're schizophrenic, you're talking about a particular boxer, you follow that sport, whatever, and suddenly you're expressing an opinion about how that person would do in a ring against a St. Bernard.
Is there a secret handshake?
And you're often talking about dogs from there, just getting caught by a loose association between the sound of the word and its multiple meanings, going off the tracks on that. So the loose associations. Next, you have a consistent one with abstraction. All of us have a pretty good intuitive sense when someone is telling us a story. Is this meant to be literal reporting of events in a sequential way? Is this meant to be a parable? Is this meant to be a somewhat second-hand through the grapevine story? We have a very good sense of how concrete or how abstract the information that we're getting is. Schizophrenics are terrible at that. They have no intuition to get the right level of abstraction. And schizophrenics always skew in the same direction, which is to interpret things far more concretely than is actually the case. And that's the term that's used in the business, concreteness of thought.
3 people working as one with one goal in mind: to defeat, or should I say demolish, the Twin Towers.
Which is having a lot of trouble doing the more abstract process of seeing things on a metaphorical level, things of that sort. So here's a standard sort of test you would give to someone if you think they're schizophrenic. You give them an association task. And you say something like, okay, can you tell me what do these things have in common? An apple, an orange, and a banana.
Well, I'm not getting in this lawn chair until you come down here and give us some candy.
And they'll say all of them are multisyllabic words. You'll say, okay, well, that's great, that's true, but anything else they have in common? Yep, all of them have letters that involved closed loops. Just getting caught up in the most concrete possible level of interpretations of it, not able to step back and do any sort of abstracting. You see this in all sorts of other ways. Therapist will meet the patient and say something like, so what's on your mind today? And they'll say, my hair, in this very literal sort of way. Or you'll say, can I take your picture, holding a camera? And they'll say, I don't have a picture to give you. This very literal sense again. Or things like, you would sit down as schizophrenic with a piece of paper and a pen and say, just as part of what we're doing here, can you write a sentence for me? Any sentence. And then you look at what they've written, which is a sentence for me, any sentence. And then you say, no, actually that's not what I mean. I mean, can you come up with a sentence, and when you've thought of that sentence, write it. And they'll write the word it, because they can't get out of the concreteness of saying, could you write a sentence? Can you write, a sentence? They're caught up in the concrete level of that. A way that always pops up, one of the classic types of tests that's done is called proverb tests. Proverbs, by definition, they are metaphorical, they are parables, they are abstract, and we all know intuitively that when you're talking about birds of a feather flock together, you're doing something sort of symbolic about the well-known homogamy of lips with and people and who they choose to marry and the similarities. Yes, birds of a feather flock together, it's talking about like tend to assort with like. Give proverbs to schizophrenics and they can't get out of the most concrete level of interpretation of it. So you sit them down and you say, okay, tell me what this means. A rolling stone gathers no moss. And we all know that people are on the move, don't make emotional connections, there's a detachment, whatever. And they're often saying, stones rolling down hills, it's very hard for plants to grow on them. It's very hard because the surface tends to be smooth, and then on top of it, if it's rolling, you got like this angular motion that will trip. So it's very hard for moss to grow on stones. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen that happen, and I've seen many stones, and on the most concrete possible level, incapable of pulling it back to the level of abstraction. Consistent feature of this. Here, a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist came up with what has to be one of the all-time great proverb tests for figuring out if someone has the remotest tendency towards schizophrenic concreteness. There was an abstract phrase, sort of proverb, that was very popular, that was very prevalent in the United States during World War II. It was up on posters in all the post offices, places like that, and it was a way of abstractly telling people, be careful the information you put in letters that you were sending off to loved ones who were off at war, because it may inadvertently wind up in the wrong hands and could carry information that could be extremely damaging to the war effort. Okay, do people know what it is? Loose lips sink ships. Loose lips sink ships, wonderfully abstract notion. Try sitting down a schizophrenic and saying, what does it mean when you say loose lips sink ships? And suddenly there's this imagery of ships being capsized by big lips coming out of the water and things of that sort, because it can only be dealt with on the very concrete level.
So I think it's safe to say that if I am crazy, it's not schizophrenia or paranoia or one of those disorders. I will suggest that the media does seem to be psychologically abusing people and exacerbating mental unwellness, and that's going to hit people in different ways. Here's Ian McGilchrist talking to AEI about simulating schizophrenia.
For example, many of the movements in the visual arts in the last 100 years exemplify various phenomena of distorted vision which are found in people with right hemisphere damage. So some of the actual movements that became popular exemplified phenomena that until now have been quite peculiar to people with schizophrenia. And you see this also in, for example, the literature, where a deliberate effect of sense of alienation, that perhaps other people are machines, they're not really living, but they're almost like sort of terrifying zombies, or the sense that you yourself are cut off and unable to feel for anything, the distortion of perspective, the deliberate disruption of narrative, which has been part of the way in which novels have been written at periods during the last 100 years.
Miley, get out of here. Get the fuck out of here, man. Every day it's the same shit.
The willingness to strip things away from context and deliberately make them seem strange or odd creates an effect which
lots of land under starry skies above
is awfully like the experiences that people with schizophrenia describe. They seem to be experiencing something that modernist artists, writers, and even philosophers
are so uncanny that they're still shocking to the modern eye, which is really something.
Seem to be tackling, which is this kind of devitalization, this alienation, this disembodiment, this mechanization, and so forth, which comes out in the art and culture.
Now I'd like you to perceive my work in a new light. I am a Christian magician.
It is not the job of artists to give the audience what the audience want. If the audience knew what they needed, then they wouldn't be the audience. They would be the artists. It is the job of artists to give the audience what they need. My career as a magician continues to evolve. Since I, to a certain degree, believe art and magic to be interchangeable, it has seemed only natural that art should be the means by which I express magical ideas. This has found its way into my prose writing, in works such as Voice of the Fire, and probably most visibly has found its way into the performance pieces that I've done at various locations over the past 8 years. Beautiful little psychedelic artifacts in their own right, which actually capture the kind of narrative journey that we've tried to take the readers on as part of these performances, to overwhelm the sensibilities of the audience, to tip them over into a kind of psychedelic state where we can hopefully actually change their consciousness and direct it to different places, different levels, hopefully into new and hopefully magical spaces.
Mr. Halliday, something I don't understand. You're not an avatar, are you?
No.
Is Halliday really dead?
Yes.
Then what are you?
Goodbye, Parzival. Thanks. Thanks for playing my game.
When we are doing the will of our true self, we are inevitably doing the will of the universe. In magic, these are seen as indistinguishable. That every human soul is in fact one human soul. It is the soul of the universe itself, and as long as you are doing the will of the universe, then it is impossible to do anything wrong. The one place in which gods and demons inarguably exist is in the human mind, where they are real in all their grandeur and monstrosity. Much of magic, as I understand it, in the Western occult tradition, is the search for the self with a capital S. This is understood as being the great work, as being the gold that alchemists sought, as being the will, the soul, the thing that we have inside us that is behind the intellect, the body, the dreams, the inner dynamo of us, if you like. Now, this is the single most important thing that we can ever attain, the knowledge of our own self. And yet there are a frightening amount of people who seem to have the urge not just to ignore the self, but actually seem to have the urge to obliterate themselves. This is horrific, but you can almost understand the desire to simply wipe out that awareness because it's too much of a responsibility to actually possess such a thing as a soul, such a precious thing. What if you break it? What if you lose it? Mightn't it be best to anesthetize it, to deaden it, to destroy it, to not have to live with the pain of struggling towards it and trying to keep it pure? I think that the way that people immerse themselves in alcohol, in drugs, in television, in any of the addictions that our culture throws up can be seen as a deliberate attempt to destroy any connection between themselves and the responsibility of accepting and owning a higher self and then having to maintain it